Are you still using the dry wet knob on your insert effects? Well, are you also tired of your mix sounding like a muddied pile of shit? Hi, I'm Ian Bieto, and today I want to show you how to use parallel effects effectively in your mix. Assuming that the plugin is coded correctly, using the dry wet knob on something like a compressor is actually incredibly useful for referencing what it is you're doing, blending in the sound while maintaining unity gain. That's also assuming you've set the compressor correctly, so that you can blend the dry wet knob, not have an increase in volume from the wet signal if you've cranked the makeup gain way too loud, and actually hear what it sounds like to blend the dry and the wet signals, as obvious as that sounds. Due to the nature of how dry wet knobs actually work, by when you turn up the knob, you're actually going to have a reduction of your source signal to introduce the level of your wet signal. It's not actually what our brain expects to hear when we're mixing spatial effects like reverbs and delays. When I get to the spatial elements in my mix, I actually like to start with the dry wet knob because it's just a really easy way to figure out if that effect is going to work on that source. But it's not where I leave things, and that's because I prefer to use parallel effects processing, which in theory you could get it to work the same exact way as dry wet knob, but the advantage here is that you can also leave your drier source signal alone, process it separately, while having your spatial effects alongside them processed separately. And the best part is, especially for us live users where you can't actually control where the sound goes to the return, you can put this wherever you want in your chain. Before, after, on a bus, in a sub bus, you can stack parallel effects. The possibilities are really limitless, and that's what I want to show you. Now, a little tidbit I mentioned earlier about our brains not expecting to hear the source a certain way when blending spatial effects with a dry wet knob. In my experience, you should be blending your spatial effects into your mix, not into the sound individually. And the reason is because while it might sound good on its own or soloed, what really matters is your spatial awareness while mixing. So if you're only aware of what it sounds like on that individual sound, guess what? Probably not going to work with everything else you've been setting up the whole time. So it's really important that your volume of your source material stays the same while blending up your parallel effects into the source. Now, the last little disclaimer I want to make about using the dry wet knob on spatial effects is that I still do it from time to time. I usually reserve that for things like arrangement effects, for example, a reverb in a build-up, where I want the source material to actually get quieter as the effect gets louder, because I don't want to have to rebalance the mix in a build-up. It's much easier to just turn up the knob. There's a lot of plugins that do it this way, and it can be a very handy mixing tool. But that's a little besides the point of this video, so let's jump in. So before I get into anything too serious like an actual session, I just wanted to get you familiar with the process and my process on how I would approach something like a vocal, for example. This is a splice vocal that I just pulled, and I just made a quick little loop from it, so I'll let you hear it dry.
Vince Ball, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm bowling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Now I'm in Vince Ball, you.
Super simple. I'm gonna get some compression going first, and then we can move from there.
Now I'm in Vince Ball, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm bowling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time.
This sounded good to me. Obviously, this is not in relation to anything else. I'm not even using a reference, so take it for what you will. Let's assume that we're very happy with how this sounds like in our very real mix here, and I want to go and add some spatial effects to this. We'll load up a stock instance of Ableton Reverb because this is the best example of how a dry wet knob will actually trick your brain.
Vince Ball, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm bowling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Now I'm in Vince Ball, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm bowling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time.
Now, you might have been thinking, oh, it's starting to sound pretty good when you turn up that dry wet knob, but the moment I turned it off, you realize that the vocal actually gets louder, and that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. So while this might be a good starting point, we can go from here. Just press Ctrl G in Live to group this. You right click, create chain, and you can go back here and you've already set up your parallel rack. For spatial effects, this doesn't really require any further setup because you don't really have to worry too much about things like phase cancellation when working with reverbs and delays. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure your dry wet knob is 100% now, and then probably lower the volume on the channel just to make sure you're not going to blow your ears off.
Vince Ball, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm bowling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Now I'm in Vince Ball, you know that I.
And you can tell that the source signal isn't actually getting quieter when we turn this rack on. And that is just the start of the benefit of doing something like this. In my opinion, in a setup like this especially, you should always be EQing your reverbs because there's a lot of room for improvement.
Vince Ball, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm bowling.
Just like that, we were able to take care of the frequency buildup that was occurring. Now, granted, we haven't touched the pre-delay or any other of the settings on the verb other than the dry wet knob, but I think this shows my point clearly enough. The next step I'll typically do after EQing is adding a compressor to sidechain from the source to the affected signal. So you can see here I grabbed from channel 2, which is what this is on, and I can tell it where I want to listen from. Let's say after the last compressor.
Now I'm invincible, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm rolling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Now I'm invincible, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm rolling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Now I'm invincible, you know that I was ghosting on my grind.
Got a little carried away there. Now that we can hear what's happening, you just blend it to taste. So you come back over here, just very simply mix it into your source.
Invincible, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm rolling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Now I'm invincible, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm rolling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Now I'm invincible, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm rolling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Now I'm invincible, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm rolling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Now I'm invincible, you know that I was ghosting on my grind.
Now, as I continue to get carried away, this actually proves my point really easily. This type of workflow is very, very intuitive and allows you to get results relatively quickly. I could probably export this, send this to whoever I want, and they're not really going to have an issue with how this sounds, even with the effects baked in, because it's so managed, versus if I was to just have left it with the reverb as an insert with the dry wet blended, it could have been really problematic in a mix because you're going to lose definition and clarity from your source.
Invincible, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm rolling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Invincible, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm rolling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Now I'm
All right, so this is something I've been working on, and I wanted to show you the application of parallel effects in an actual project, because that's where it matters the most. This combines all of the stuff I already showed you previously, but as you can see, there's layers to this bitch. So let's take a listen to the track as a whole, and then I'll break it down for you. So if we start at the main vocal chain and just kind of work our way down here, first sub bus, secondary sub bus, and then, yeah, that's really it. This is technically part of the first and not the second, because I have a filter applied to technically only these two things at the moment. Anyways, you get an idea for how this is organized. Let's take a listen to the before and after of everything that's going on.
This time I wanna be sincere with each other. Let's not keep all our feelings undercover. This time I wanna be sincere with each other. Let's not keep all our feelings undercover. This time I wanna be sincere with each other. Let's not keep all our feelings undercover. This time I wanna be sincere with each other. Let's not keep all our feelings undercover.
You can kind of hear what the sound became as we worked our way up the layers. You can see I really don't have any type of serious compression going on, and that's because this sample has reverb baked into it already. So by compressing that, I'd be bringing it out, and that's not really my goal here. I just wanted to kind of level things out, which is why the first thing on the main chain is a limiter. Valhalla Room is just allowing us to fit the vocal into the rest of the mix, making it feel coherent and cohesive spatially with everything else I've already done.
This time I wanna be sincere with each other. This time I wanna be sincere with each other.
Now for the parallel rack, here's the dry signal processing, which I didn't really do too much to. Here's the first space, which is just Ableton stock reverb, some EQ, and then sidechain to this channel. And then here's the Valhalla plate to layer and give it just a little bit extra depth. The longer space, which is a lot further back in the mix and helps these two spaces feel more connected in the mix overall and to the vocal. So this, very simple. And I've just kind of rounded it off, and then same thing, compression, but instead this time to this channel, because I want the depth to react to how intense the filter is. So if the filter's low, it's probably not gonna sidechain as heavy as if the filter's completely open. Then we just have some Pro Q4, cleaning things up, some resonances, trying again to balance out these fundamentals here. And then lastly, sidechain from the kick drum because it's a dance record. And then on the primary vocal bus, basically more correction. This is just kind of making sure that the vocal sounds good in the mix itself, plus a limiter for making sure the vocal is at its maximum loudness potential. And I just quickly added a little Pro Q4 for some de-essing, if you want to call it that. I was just hearing that the S's in the vocal are starting to compete with the hi-hats, so just added that on real quick. Let's come back for a second to the splice vocal, because I want to show you one more thing before we wrap up. A common technique on returns are throws, because you can automate how much is going to the return at any point in time. It's kind of difficult to replicate that type of thing on an insert, because if you're just turning up the dry and wet knob, the moment you turn it back down again, you're going to lose the wet signal. So how do you get around that? Let's use this delay Comeback Kid. It actually has a dry out and a wet out separately with a ducker. Now, that is really good for insert effects, for creating builds like I mentioned earlier, but in my opinion, it's still not as good as doing what we did to this reverb here, where we actually give it a signal to listen to compress, or whatever else we want to do to it. So what you're going to want to do first is grab a utility and put it before whatever effect you're going to have. Second, you're going to want to nuke the dry signal, because we don't need that where we're going. Third, apply whatever EQ and compression you're going to want for ducking. You can use volume, you can use an envelope, doesn't really matter. I just really like the sound of compressors on spatial effects like this, because it makes it feel kind of gooey. Now, once we pick a destination and set a little bit of a curve and some settings here, we can get started mixing it in.
Been spoiled, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Been spoiled, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Nah, been spoiled, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm rolling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time.
Okay, well, I got carried away again because it kind of sounded just cool blending it into it. I might have to turn this into something, but let me actually add another delay instead that I will actually do this to, and then I'll just show you after I've set it up. Okay, so for real this time, let's say you just wanted this part of the vocal to delay over the bar. So what you would do is you could take the gain knob, you draw some automation for the gain to only allow the signal that you want to pass into it to go through the reverb. Even if I extend it like this and I turned off this compressor, for the sake of this demonstration, you're going to hear the delay bleed over the vocal, but you'll see that it's not going to continue delaying because we've automated the input.
It's time. Now I'm invincible, and now you know I do it so much.
You heard how it just decayed?
You know this time. Now I'm invincible.
So as you can see, you have a lot of flexibility. Let's turn on everything and just take a listen to what it sounds like.
Invincible, you know that I was ghosting on my grind. Now I'm rolling around these towns, yeah, and doing all this time. Now I'm invincible.
While I have said in the past that there is no right or wrong way to do anything, that doesn't necessarily mean that there are other ways that don't work better or work better for you than what you're currently doing. So all I ask is that you keep an open mind and remember that trial and error is your best friend, because that's the only way to find what actually works for you. That's all for now, and as always, thank you for watching. It means the world to me. If you have any questions, be sure to ask them in the comments, and don't forget, you have yet to make your best music.